Hey everybody, welcome back. So my name is Ambyes, and I just want to really briefly point out that I've done a couple of videos like this before, but they seem to be gaining traction, probably because the game is getting close to coming out, and I just want to put it out there. I'm just a fan. I'm someone who really deeply enjoys the content and likes kind of filtering through the trailer and the screen caps and looking for different little things that I think might not be noticed when you first watch it, especially if you're a casual viewer. So I just want to point some of these things out. But before we move on, I do want to say I've had to kind of block a couple people because they're just so aggressively frustrated that my opinions don't align with theirs. So definitely, if this sort of thing is going to upset you, or you find it difficult to hear other people's opinions, maybe don't watch this video. I don't feel like anything I'm saying is too outrageous, but I also don't want to make people uncomfortable, and I think it's really uh, really not good to be upset by someone's video where they're just kind of pointing out things in the trailer. So for your own well-being, make sure that if you are sensitive to people having opinions, or just maybe disagreeing with your own fan theory, maybe don't watch this video, because I'm just kind of extrapolating on what I see and what I think could happen, and I have lots of opinions. Now, without further ado, let me show you some videos I've already made that you might be interested in, and the video that I made prior to this. I have a couple reordered trailer videos, one from a year ago where we first kind of got introduced to the game and the concept, and then I have one most recently, which is what this will be based off, where I have reordered the trailer and kind of what I think might be the general correct timeline. I also have a video where I reference Fragile's ending speech and how it seems to relate to these trailers. There is a Only Higgs video that I've put out of all of his scenes, kind of just talking about his new look and what might be going on there. I also have a video where I have circled his Qpid he got from Amelie. Basically he stole it. It is originally Sam's, but it actually glows in one of the trailers when he touches Lou's pod, so I kind of talk about what I think that could be. We also have a very in-depth 3-hour long 3-part video all about string theory, physics, and how it relates to these new trailers and how it related to Death Stranding 1. If you are into science and want to know anything about how math actually relates to the game, that would be a really good video for you if you are into that sort of thing. And lastly, the previous video that I posted was the first 2 minutes of the trailer broken down. It ended up being about 40 minutes by the end of all of it, and this one will probably be just as long, so let's get into it. Let that yawn out. So the first thing we have is kind of this, a lot of people are calling it the Amelie effigy. Basically, it's something that looks like someone and kind of has meaning. A lot of times, though, when you think of an effigy, you think of a burned effigy, which is something that you would like burn to kind of, make a metaphor of something. So you might burn something that you don't like. So this is a little bit different because it's not burned effigy. It's literally more of like a totem, a statue, something to represent. Now that part's probably obvious to you, but what might be less obvious is what some of the meanings could possibly be behind this. So if you didn't notice, not only does it look like Amelie, but it does look like they are holding an infant in their arms, or rather they have an infant looking icon on their chest. They don't really seem to have arms. Some of the things that this resembles are the Mother Mary statue or paintings that are pretty popular in Catholicism. We also have some angelic imagery with the circular sun pattern, which is very reminiscent of ancient Egyptian culture, which we know that Higgs is very interested in game 1. He bases a lot of his motifs and interests off of Egyptian lore. King Tutankhamun is actually the pharaoh that he is basing his hieroglyphs off of in his bunker, and that's actually what's written on the tomb of King Tutankhamun's sarcophagus, basically. And so we do know that he also has the headpiece, and that's where his scarf poncho, the golden black, comes from. So there's a lot of Egyptian notes to it. Some other divine influences that we might have if we go back to Christianity are the fact that in the first game, Sam was often referred to as a Christ-like character, in the fact that he was called like the Great Deliverer, which of course was a play on him delivering cargo, but it's also kind of a reference to him being a savior, the person who, has to die in order to save the people. So there were a lot of parallels drawn to that. And then, of course, you have Amelie, who's sort of this extinction entity, godlike character. So I do find that to be of some interest. She is not on a crucifix of any kind, so I don't think that we are creating a new sort of cross or any sort of metaphor like that. I do want to briefly touch on how I think this is related to math, because I'm a big believer that everything is related to math in this game. So in one of my my longest theory video about string theory and knot theory, all of the characters' names came from different forms of math. So you have Amelie, which is part of the Killing Lattice matrices. You have Clifford, who's part of Clifford algebra. Lisa is a black hole viewer, just like Cliff's wife was Lisa. So there's a lot of connections to math. One of the things that we noticed in the trailer was that we have servers now. The beach has basically become a dial-up, like high-speed internet, and something that I had briefly touched on is that I feel like the beach is actually just a computer, because of the fact that we have chiral printing and things like that. And then to have that confirmed was really nice. And so I do think that we can look at math for some of the imagery on this effigy. So, to have a better understanding, you'll have to watch my other theory video, but the basics are the greatest common denominator between two numbers can give you the beats and silences in music. That same pattern looks very similar to the effigy of Amelie, and of course we have Higgs, who is playing a guitar, so I think that that's interesting. To add to that, we also have the three-state busy beaver, which, if you're not familiar with that, is the base for the Turing machine, which is the modern, it's the father of all algorithms. We would not have computers without the Turing machine, and we wouldn't have the Turing machine without the three-state busy beaver, which is that yellow and white photo that you can see there. So that represents zeros and ones in a visual way, rather than how we think of them now, which is as data. And that is also very similar to the effigy. So I think the top part of the effigy with the lines is representative of the plate gates that we see in the game. And so that's the next part we're going to talk about. Those plate gates are similar to these mathematical shapes. And now that we know that we are basically in a computer sort of area, the beach has these servers and can connect to others, the past and the future. I think we're going to see more of that physics and string theory pop up. Without harping on it too much, the bottom part where I said it looked kind of like sun or Egyptian, that's also a big deal in math. You have all the angles, sine, cosine, and so I do think that that could just be another example of radial symmetry. It's a good example of it being symmetrical but not chiral symmetry, and so I think it's supposed to represent opposition in a way as well. We have the plate gates, and we now know that plate gates, which we're seeing right here, are how we can travel from continent to continent, and we don't have to basically cross the water. So that's going to be a fun game mechanic, where I think instead of having the realism of getting on a boat, or maybe the less realistic version of like teleporting, they are saying these plate gates can transport us. I'm a little curious if there will be any relation to drawbridge and these plate gates, simply because the form and the shape of the plate gate kind of forms what you would think of as a bridge normally, especially like a bridge over water. Some people felt like this was a dried up ocean. I honestly did not even think about that. To me, I'm just assuming that this is in the seam. I know it's not blue, but I don't necessarily think it has to be blue if this is a connection point. We know that Amelie told Sam that she could take him halfway and that her beach, ran so far. And we basically know that she could take him kind of all over the UCA from her beach. And that's kind of how the game ends. And so I think there's something to be said for the it mirroring our world. We've not seen Heartman yet in the video where I'm talking about it, but he is mapping out the globe. That's how we're introduced to him in the trailers. He is kind of working on a 4D sphere where he's putting in coordinates, and I believe he's mapping out the mirror or the chiral symmetry of the seam compared to our own world. I'll say the word chiral symmetry a lot because it is interesting in the fact that symmetry means that something can be split in half and be even on both sides or be symmetrical. Chiral symmetry, which is found all through nature, in our DNA, in proteins, and is very much the building blocks of life, it's different. So chiral symmetry is when you look at both of your hands, and when you put them together and then open them up, they look symmetrical. But if you were only to cut one of your hands in half, it would not be symmetrical. So that's where chiral symmetry is different than symmetry and very important to this game. I think there's a link between the BB scans and what he is scanning. Not necessarily that he's scanning a BB, but I think there's some correlation there. But mostly it's because I think that BBs are able to warp space and time in some way, and that's why they're so effective at creating the chiral network, and initially how Sam gets his repatriate abilities and why Lou may have them as well. I think there's something to be said that a connection to the beach, no matter how minor, can give you some sort of upper hand, extinction factor as they call it in the game, while the extinction factor is typically something that would be a negative and would cause you to become extinct. In this game, it basically gives you dooms, and in a way that's creating these Homo Ludens, which are basically a new species. And in the first game, we're kind of told, actually maybe this is a good thing. I've already done a 40-minute video on why I think BBs are sort of like black holes that are able to wrap time back around so that Sam is able to repatriate, and you can watch that at a different time, but I think we're going to see more of that funky time travel-esque stuff going on here, and I think that's why the scans look the way they do. There's a circle. Obviously, we already know that BBs connect to the other side and are able to connect to their still mothers because they have technically not been born yet. Now, the coffin's been something that a lot of people have a lot of opinions on, and I have opinions as well. So if you disagree, that's totally fine, but here's what I've noticed. First, I want to point out that the effigy, of course, is on the casket. He is being carried by what appears to be people, but maybe robots. As we've seen, there are kind of two types in the game. Now, one type looks much more human than the other type, and they do not have glowing stomachs or robot faces. There's a backpack, I guess I'm gonna call it, on these types, and I'm curious kind of what that is. They also have staffs with the effigy on it, and the casket is decorated with these kind of XY motifs. And we also know there's tar coming out of the inside. Now, one possibility is not just that, the tar is there because Higgs is a villain and they want him to look evil, but the tar we already know has healing properties, so it's very possible that traveling with the tar surrounding them in the coffin gives them some sort of healing ability. Perhaps they've been in a battle prior to this, or it could be when they're coming off the beach. We still don't know a lot about that other than the fact that he did get off the beach, so we don't know what happened there. Some great questions that people have asked me are, what do you think that he's wearing the armor for? Some of the people have thought, well, it's purely for aesthetics, it's because he's lost his powers and he needs the extra muscle, and then others have even thought maybe he needs the armor for protection against things on the beach, which with the latest trailer, we do know that there's a lot more danger on the beach than maybe there was prior. If you're not a huge Death Stranding buff, you may not recognize this image, but now it's more popular. This was released about a year ago, but it's the new Qpid for Death Stranding 2 that he's using in the trailer. This Qpid was worn by Coffin, the character who was introduced in the director's cut and added in, and we found out that they were Fragile's mother and that they headed off a terrorist group in order to fight bridges over them creating bridge babies. Basically, they were trying to fight domestic terrorism, but became terrorists themselves in a way. The whole point of that backstory is to basically help you learn that Higgs, when he was a porter, was picked up by Coffin because he showed promise, worked with Coffin, became a terrorist. So basically he was raised to be a terrorist by Fragile's mother. And then whenever he left to go and complete these events, it's unclear whether Coffin sent him to do that, or if he kind of went out on his own. But basically he goes out, he's a terrorist, he ends up connecting with Fragile. It is not made clear whether or not Fragile and him understand who the other is. They never make it clear if Higgs actually got the message from Coffin that Fragile is her daughter and that he should take care of her because she thinks of him as a adopted son, and therefore Fragile is his sister. Now, regardless of all the weird connotations that might have, it's important to note that Coffin wears a coffin-shaped necklace because she feels that the most important things in life are fragile and need to be carried in a coffin. That obviously is probably a play on life is fragile, and whenever your life is over, you get put in a casket. I want to also note that in the director's cut, once you find Coffin's body, her grave, you also find a very docile BT who will not attack you and will simply look at you and then go away. It's heavily implied that that is Coffin's ghost body, whatever. And her gravestone says, "Together for tomorrow." Lastly, we kind of know that in the distro center where you get this coffin mission, there's a photo on the counter, and I just wanted to point out that it does appear to have photos of Fragile. I'm interested though in the outfit that she's wearing because that does look like the drawbridge jacket, and it looks like Rainy's boots. So I'm kind of curious if we're going to find out that she created that jacket as like a homage to her childhood, or if that's just something that's always been around and now everybody just happens to have that jacket. Lastly, we're made aware in the director's cut that Fragile does not have a good relationship with her mother. In the emails and even in our conversations with Sam, she says things like, she left when I was 12. I don't remember her. I don't, talk about her, basically. Like, she really holds that against her mom. We find out that the dad has been giving letters, handwritten letters to porters to sneak to Coffin because he still loves her and understands why she's doing what she's doing, but he stayed behind to raise Fragile. So I think that photo of her in the black jacket would be taken and given to Coffin after she's left, but Fragile wouldn't know unless we get a retcon where actually she was in cahoots with her mom and she does know what's going on. But that would be a huge retcon.
There's no pretending I will hold you.
So I decided to download the 4K version of this trailer, and I'm really frustrated that I didn't do it sooner because I now realize that what I thought was just a really odd shadow, I thought it was something else, is literally Fragile's shadow, which means that the next scene that we notice with the ruler where we can see her shadow really changes the timeline for me. Or rather, I guess it is more convincing of a timeline. So I do have Sam's glove in my last video or Fragile's glove as them making the handprints. And that must be confirmed here because when we see the shadow of the hand on the wall, that handprint's already there. So that must confirm that that's actually Fragile's hand touching the wall with the ring on it, or that Sam has just joined Drawbridge and is going somewhere. So that's the reason you should always do 4K first. And back to the regular audio that I was recording before I figured out the setting of events has changed on me. So just some basic things I want to point out. This is adorable. Now, I think it's really fun that we have these blocks that are in such interesting shapes. We obviously have circle, square, and a star, and a crab. So I thought that was interesting because, of course, we always associate stars with the sky and crabs with the beach. I also just love that there's a little truck back there. But I want to point out to the right, we have babies commonly have a toy that looks like that circular kind of hat. I don't even know, like Fiesta Hat looking thing. But that is also what a black hole looks like when you see it visually graphed out. So we have stars, we have the crab, and we have a black hole, similar shape. From what I could tell from the trailer, we're actually, if the camera was to rise up, we would actually see Lou's crib in front of us, because on the other side, from another scene, you can tell that the blocks are over by the kitchen, so we're kind of turned towards where her crib is at the moment. And we know that Lou already has a lot of kind of signs of specialness. I mean, she can help you repatriate. She basically can travel through space and time. She's able to survive void outs with Sam. And her bib has stars on it, so I do think she is representing something of space. And obviously, I think the crab is a beach reference. If you didn't catch it the first time, her bib features stars, it has angel wings on the back, and of course it has her name Louise, named so for Sam's unborn daughter, although there are a lot of theories that think that this BB is actually his real daughter. And I hope that we get some clarity on that, because that was always an open-ended theory that while Lucy did euthanize herself with help from Bridget after seeing the Doom's nightmares given to her allegedly by Sam's child in her womb, there's actually no evidence that the baby died with her in the void out and wasn't removed from her, just like they do to still mothers in the game. So I still think that there's a possibility that his poor baby is out there, and possibly that his wife isn't even dead, because we have no idea if Bridget actually gave Lucy a true drug, a true euthanasia drug, or if she just comatosed her and made her into a still mother for more horrible experiments. And you might be thinking, well, there was a void out. Of course she died. I don't know that, because Amelie, who is also Bridget, as we know, she has a split cot and a split haw. So, Amelie was having Higgs at one point manufacture void outs by leaving dead bodies around. So I don't think it would be far-fetched to imagine that they took Lucy, made her into a still mother, put Lou into a pod, and manufactured a void out and said to Sam, "Oh, that's too bad, sorry." Because Sam was supposed to be a special baby even before Amelie saved him by giving him the scar on his stomach and then allowing him to repatriate. So even before he could repatriate, they felt that he was special and the key to whatever they needed to happen in the future. So for him to have a baby, that those genetics would only be stronger, and allegedly if he had a baby, it would inherit his abilities. So I can't imagine that Bridget would give Lucy medicine to kill a baby that should be just as important and as skilled and possibly magical as Sam is.
Hold you and protect you.
First of all, very excited for Troy Baker to be singing in this game. So excited they're finally using that in game. I think it's going to be great. Secondly, this is the most controversial take I have, I suppose. People did not like this in the little trailer video that I posted, but I actually think that this scene and the Sam scene are further apart than we're being shown. That's why I kind of placed them like I did. I actually think that this sort of scene may come at a different time. Not necessarily that it's that far away from the scene that Sam is in, but there's a lot of things that don't add up. For example, Higgs is in the coffin with a mask and a jacket or poncho, whatever you want to call it. Then we see him and he has a guitar, no mask, no poncho. Then we see him in the same building in a coffin on a robot's back, piloting it basically. And then there's even another clip where he has the mask and he's like playing his guitar. But so, I'm not sure how some of those scenes are going to play out, just because Hideo is really good at kind of like interjecting scenes, and some of that could be a flashback. But I do feel as though that we're being misled a little bit, and that this scene is earlier than we are assuming. So I do think it goes close to here in the sequence of events. Something to point out would be the icons on the coffin, the fact that it's shaped obviously like a coffin, and that the thing that comes up out of it that you can see there leaking tar is really reminiscent of the BB pods. So we can definitely assume that perhaps this is some sort of vessel that allows him to travel from the beach and back. Perhaps he has separated his Ka and his Ha. I don't really believe that theory, but there's a lot of people who do, and I think that could be such a cool thing if he really is two separate people now. I think it's more about the healing properties, as I think he's going to be more human, or at least weaker than he was in the previous game. So I think that's part of where this armor is coming from. I noticed that the guns in the back are kind of similar to the Bolo guns. I really am loving the red. I hope that we get those guns. I'm absolutely going to nerd out about the costuming. The details are immaculate. So, for example, the first thing that I noticed was we have LC on his hood. Now, if you don't know, the Higgs Boson particle that Higgs has named himself after is created by the Large Hadron Collider, which basically threw particles together at just insane amounts of like the speed of light, whatever. There's a whole video about that on my channel, but I wondered if it was a play on the Large Hadron Collider, and he says that he's, producing weapons from this facility, and so I kind of think it could be that it's a name for something, maybe something along the lines of like Ludens Company or something company. I do think it'll have something to do with that. Not necessarily that it'll mean anything, but I just keep waiting for Ludens to come back into the game. Now, things that I actually have evidence for would be the details on the jacket, and we have some really cool details. So the LC reminds me of what we see on Rainy's dress when it says made in the UCA, and the letters are simply rotated versions of one another. So the U 90 degrees is a C, 90 degrees is an A, and so that makes me think that they could possibly still be around and that he could have some relationship to them, or at the very least they printed this. Those symbols, the X looking symbols, are also on the Magellan ship and many other fabrics, so it could just be evidence that APAC created this outfit like they've created many of the other items in the game. And while the robots probably aren't affected by timefall, the hood shows us that there is still a threat of timefall, as it still appears to have an automatic hood opening. That's what the bars are on the hood. So I think that is of interest, because that implies that Higgs at least can still be damaged by things that damage normal humans. And as far as I'm aware, it's not like timefall harmed BTs, because they bring it on. So I think that's more evidence that Higgs is not necessarily a beached thing or cursed in any way. I actually think he's going to end up being very human. Another thing is those dotted letters. A lot of people have thought it's Morse code. I thought it was Morse code. Then I thought it had something to do with possibly matrices again, because that was a big thing in the last game. But I'm starting to think Moth MX is the name of like the bunker that Sam is in. You can see it on the walls. And it's a hand unlocking mechanism that Fragile uses to go into the opening that we'll see in a minute. Basically, the cargo hold has that exact pattern. So just another connection to a company that already exists in game. Another thing that I'm really excited for, because I think it's just such a neat concept, is that the mouth actually moves. Every time we see it in the trailer, it is actually changing expression. It's really obvious once you notice that this version of the mask has teeth. And other times when you see Higgs, his mouth is closed when he's wearing the mask, or it's smiling, and I think that's going to be really neat. So I wonder, does it simply mimic his own expression, Or is this mask going to have sort of an AI of its own? We see Charlie, we see Dollman, and so it would be really interesting. I personally don't think that Amelie is coming back, unfortunately. I really liked her, even though she was like technically evil. I thought she was a cool character. I don't think she's coming back in this game. But if she does, I think it would be so cool if she was kind of imbued in the mask somehow. I've lightened this so we can get a better look, but I do think it's neat that you can see like kind of a similar mask on. It's black. It does appear to have the eye makeup though, which is just kind of comical when you think about the fact that that's just like a stick with a mask on it, kind of like a tennis ball with something just stuck to it, because you can very obviously tell that these guys are robots. I'm not so sure about the ones we see on the beach carrying the coffin. They look a lot more humanoid to me, but the ball joints for the wrist are literally ball joints like a doll, so we know that these guys are definitely robots. And we can get a little bit closer look at the guns. Unfortunately, it is blurry, so you can't really make out any words or details. But I did notice on his shoulder that there appears to be kind of a logo there, and I'm gonna assume that it's the Ghost Mech logo that we saw Troy Baker wearing at SXSW.
Let love warm.
Again, the attention to detail is incredible, so let's break this down. I love the fact that we have a plant showing that it's lived in. I love the little the Ludens duck is in the background. We have an ad for pizza, which is kind of funny, and I like that they put that in there. I think we can assume that this is Lou's pod from whenever she was taken out, when she was brought to the incinerator by Sam. And so I do think this is her original pod. Later on, we do see other pods. I do not think they are the same pod. The only pod that might be hers is the one on the Magellan, and we're going to look into that later. The pizza is funny to me because that is something that if you do 5 pizza orders in Death Stranding 1 for a Peter Engelbert, then you are rewarded with some weapons from Higgs himself post-game. There's a tagline that says, "We all love pizza," and then the words in white say, "Pizza is the sun on the table." There's so many details in this room that I'm excited to kind of look at. There's things that I think sometimes we look at and we don't even recognize that they're new to us. The Dreamcatcher, for example, is not something that I remember from the last game, and I'm fairly sure that it's new and specific to this game. Sam's is on the left. I believe that is Lou's on the right, which is wonderful news for me because I've been curious as to why there is a star-shaped web on the t-shirt merch that Hideo has been selling with the company Braindead. And I've been curious about how that's going to factor into the game. We know that Sam's Dreamcatcher is a totem that allows him to travel back and forth to the beach. He is given this by Amelie, and it's a strong personal connection, and that's the reason that it works. He gives the Qpid to Amelie, and that allows her to have a deep connection to him, which I have lots of opinions on why Higgs takes the Qpid and keeps it and still has it, and I think it's going to tie into some of the stuff in the game, but let's focus on this Dreamcatcher first. It is in the shape of a star, which the only other time we see stars is of course on Lou's bib, and in the last game we see it on Mama's mobile toy that she has for her BT. The implications that this is Lou's Dreamcatcher actually may help us make some connection. So she could possibly be the extinction entity, because that is actually what Amelie's web looked like whenever she was trying to keep herself, I guess, away while Sam and Higgs were fighting. That is the new merch that Hideo has out right now. And initially, webs were a big part of bridges. They were part of the original logo, and we actually see that in this newest trailer behind Lucy. And so their original thing was all about webs. And of course, we had Cliff, who famously was on a spider web with all of the doll BBs. The implication typically is that they're in a web of lies. Amelie was a lie, Bridget lied about things, everything is just a lot of lies, and they're trying to build bridges, and yet they're building on, basically these fake promises. So just pointing that out. You can see the Moth MX up there on the top left. I'm curious if possibly this is actually Sam's original bunker, only because he's wearing his original porter outfit, which we were able to match numbers to in the last video. So this could possibly just be where he lived when he ran away from Bridges the first time and they couldn't find him. He appears to be well stocked. He has lots of prepper resources. We see a lot of coolers. The other thing is that, I'm not super familiar with insulated things like what it's showing there, but I'm not sure if we're underground at this point. I do think we're probably in like a lower level, but we obviously see her ride in a cargo chute and then come up above stairs and go out, so I think we're kind of in like an underground layer right now, but I doubt that it's much bigger than just this room. I love the fact that we have a book that says let's just sing songs. It's giving us really a good idea of Lou's developmental stages, and I'm not confident that she's tomorrow. I was at first. I was like, that's gotta be her. If she is, I definitely think it's gonna be a separation of Ka and Ha, which would be so neat. But I don't really know how that would work, long term. Some of the decals on the wall, I noticed that we have obviously an elephant and a lion. I'm wondering if that other shape is that new animal. I don't really know how to pronounce it. I've never heard of it until this year, but I guess it's pretty famous, like in Australia, like the quokka or something. So I'm just curious if that's what that is supposed to be. The only other detail that I really noticed was it looks like we have two really large black picture frames in the background. One is right there behind the yellow baby carrier, and then there also appears to be one over behind the cooler, which is so funny. I think I have that exact cooler from like Walmart. And of course that Fragile's jacket is wrapped around her waist, which kind of makes it difficult to tell what jacket she's actually wearing.
Stay with you by your side. Close your tired eyes and I'll wait. And soon I'll see your smile in a...
I am curious about the state of the kind of like foliage here, and more the fact that it is allowed to be growing there. So it's kind of like, is this a bunker that they've just kind of gotten into? Because it did say 11 months after the UCA. So I'm curious, is this a new bunker? Is this just the old bunker and it's kind of been taken over and Sam's got other things to worry about than cleaning up the plants in his house? We see a security camera up top in the corner of this stairwell, so I don't know why she didn't use that. I'm assuming that it doesn't work and that perhaps this is like an old abandoned prepper shelter. I tried to see what the labels on the wall were, but all I could really tell was that it kind of looks like we have maybe a danger or warning sign, just like all the distros kind of do, and then we have a no weapon sign, so I think it's just kind of typical prepper stuff. The first time I ever saw the trailer, this part caught my eye because I was really curious about the hand scanner. I don't remember seeing any tech like that in Death Stranding 1, and it had a similar feel to kind of like the Odradek that Higgs has on in this game, and some of the more like Morse code looking motifs. So I did wonder, does that mean that Moth MX is actually a newer company? Because at first I thought this was going to be an older abandoned bunker. This part kind of made me change my mind on what I thought. I did not think that this was Higgs. I really thought this was Mule's or something, because I don't understand why he would need a light on his gun. I've not seen a gun with a light. I've not seen a scoped out gun at any point. But there appears to be like basically like an AR with a scope on it, and I'm not really sure about that. So if you've noticed that in any of the clips you've seen, something that actually looks like it has like a gun light on it, I would love to know. Unfortunately, when I looked, I am now noticing for the first time the orange light that resembles sort of those robots that Higgs seems to have around their faces. So that's really unfortunate, because I did not think that was Higgs, but it might be. One of the reasons I think that Sam is not here is because we see this room in a clip where they are actually showing us the automated porter assistance company logo with the brain and all that stuff. And you can actually see this in the background, unless it's another prepper's bunker and this is just the people who make the bunkers. It appears like it's in this kind of bunker where they're showing that clip. So I do think that Sam has just left with the glove and the blue ring on. Fragile is babysitting, and you can actually see photos in the background to the left, and if you zoom in on those, they look like they are photos of Sam handing out cargo and kind of interacting. So that's really just like a cool find that I've not seen a lot of people talking about. When I zoomed in, I could actually see that that's little Lou and Sam in the top photo, and it kind of just looks like him interacting with people, really similar to how Higgs had photos all over his bunker of Sam, although they were a lot creepier. This just seems like photos that he has to keep memories. You can actually see this wall in the kitchen when he's cooking. You can see the edges of those photos. I think I'll end the video here because I found a lot more things than I thought I would find when I was going through the trailer clips. The last thing I'd say before I continue on in the other videos is that if you look at APAS and you look at the logo, you'll actually find it's very similar to one of the shapes found on Higgs's guitar.